schools should take a moment to address school safety. So I was like, wow, look at that. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here. So
Hi, this is Jason Makstein here for Moderately MoCo with Montgomery County Student Member of the Board, Sami Saeed. Hi, Sammy.
hey, how are you doing today? I'm happy to be here.
Great. Happy to have you here. And I think we got some interesting stuff to talk about today. You're going to be proposing a well, let you explain it. So,
Yeah, I appreciate it. So on October 26th, this Thursday's Board of Education meeting, I'm going to be introducing and proposing, like you said, a resolution all about safety and security in our schools. So this is basically a resolution that I've actually had in mind for a while now. The specific idea for resolution actually came to me in early September, and ever since then, I've been, going through the process of crafting this, coming up with ideas, engaging students and getting student feedback, working with administration to make sure everything in here is doable. So that process has really transpired, since September. But even before that, even when I was running for student member of the board, safety and security was one of my top priorities. And even in my school at Richard Montgomery, we had an instance of someone who didn't go to our school inside the building who was later found to have a firearm in their backpack. And I was actually walking around the school at the same time this person was in there. So it was definitely something really, really scary, that kind of prompted me to really see firsthand the importance and necessity of safety and security in our schools. And I know that, last year I told myself, if the trend of, these security threats continue into next year, because there was a number of things going on in the county, I would really take action. And in the first week of school, we had multiple shelters in place, a couple lockdowns. And just yesterday, we had 2 bomb threats. We had someone bring a loaded gun into one of our schools. And, it's just the situation is really, really becoming, it's really becoming a dire situation. And so I know that we have to take proactive action. We have to take preventative action before something really, really terrible happens. And that was kind of the inspiration for this resolution. So yeah, that's kind of where it came from. And, just a little summary of the story behind it.
okay, yeah, I know when we spoke when you were running that some of these same items were what you were talking about. And it's good to see follow through of, hey, I'm running, here's what I want to do. And now you're getting the chance to put it into action and to kind of take the lead on this project, which I think, helps. It's something where it really helps to have the students involved because you're the ones that go through this process every day. You see the holes, you see the issues with certain processes that, maybe like, for example, the ID stuff where it because of the increased security using IDs, people that didn't have IDs or, had lost them or whatever, had faced increased issues trying to access school. So, yeah, you want to just give a little bit about kind of the basics of the proposal?
Yeah. So basically, the proposal kind of comes in 2 big buckets here. So the first one is a modification of our current safety plan. So as we all know, MCPS obviously has, a safety plan in place. It's been updated recently, but basically, we're looking at evaluating that again in April. But I wanted to say, hey, I know that we're going to have this comprehensive plan, but let me make sure it includes these things. And one of those, like you just mentioned, was an expansion of the ID pilot. So the current system that we have, I think we have it in 5 schools now: Walter Johnson, Richard Montgomery, where I go, Rockville, BCC, and Seneca Valley. There's some version of the program in all those schools. So the way we do it at my school is every single morning, there's a security guard standing outside of certain entrances. So other entrances like back doors and kind of corridors are all locked. But at certain entrances, like the main office or the doors that connect to the student parking lot, they're open and a security guard is there. And you basically have to, show your student ID. And what they did was they had every student get new student IDs that were bright yellow, because that's one of our colors, but it's also easier to see and easier to spot. So you basically show your ID, and then the security guard would let you in. If you didn't have your ID, they'd stop you, and if you couldn't find one, or you lost it or whatever, you have to go to the main office where they'll print you. What we do here is they'll actually print you a whole new ID, not even just a temporary one that you can use. But at some schools, I think it's Rockville, they print you a temporary sticker. That's how we used to do it. but schools basically have the freedom to implement that process kind of however they want. Simply, they have to expand, through this resolution, that ID pilot program into all high schools. So they have to have a system of checking IDs. Now, the specifics on how they do that is up to the administration of every school. So that's probably one of the bigger parts of this resolution. I think it's something that's necessary because if you think about it right now, some high schools have absolutely no way of ensuring and checking the identity of the people who enter the building. Any kid can throw on a backpack and walk right in. And while an ID program obviously is not foolproof, it at least shows that we're doing something to prevent people who aren't supposed to be in our buildings getting in, and can actually deter people who may just be high school students from another school trying to come in, maybe cause trouble. That happened at my school last year as well. It's a deterrent. It's saying, oh, I don't have an ID. They may get nervous and decide not to come. Another thing is increased training for students and security guards just around safety procedures. So we have trainings for security guards, of course, but just seeing ways that we could possibly expand that or enhance it, either one of those, and just making sure that students are aware of, safety procedures, like how to report, safety tips and informations, what to do in emergency situations and info like that. Another one is a strategy to support school-based administrations and monitoring restrooms and implementing appropriate responses. This actually came about during my student engagement. A lot of students were saying there's issues going on in our bathroom, and I feel like it's not being monitored well enough. So some schools, most schools have a system that they use of monitoring bathrooms, but kind of in this resolution, I'm just nudging, hey, let's look at that again and see where there's ways to standardize it or enhance it or make sure that there's appropriate response methods. So if they catch someone doing something in the bathroom, what's a good way we can respond to actually mediate the issue and not just temporarily put a seal on it? And then innovative approaches to addressing drug use. Another thing that came out of my student engagement, I think drug use and safety are, linked together for sure. And I think that we just need to reiterate the importance of addressing that whenever we talk about safety. And then, finally, in the safety plan, it's implementation of additional security technology. Now, what that looks like, it could be door monitoring systems, for example, which will let, main office know when a door opens in the school, anything like that. But, again, that's really up to administration to decide how they want to do that. So that was a lot of talking. That's the safety plan. And then on the little shorter side is a new communication plan. So what this entails is basically review and possible modification of our current standard procedures for community messaging during emergency situations. Now, that's a lot of big words there. So what does that mean? Basically, when there's an emergency situation, the school is going to send out an email or text parents, students, all that kind of stuff. Now, sometimes and in some schools, the message may not be timely. It may not include, all the contents of the situation or everything that the community and stakeholders of that, school may want to know and when they want to know it. So basically, it's just reviewing that procedure and saying whether we can update it to be more timely, whether maybe we can send out a message through more platforms. I know we have the Remind app at some of our schools, so maybe that will come about. But kind of just, reviewing that and saying whether there are any changes. And then increased awareness around ways for students to report information. When I did a survey around a lot of these ideas, a lot of students told me they had no idea how to report a safety threat if they saw one. And I know this is true. One, because I really don't necessarily know that information until I looked into it. And two, students would personally text me with safety threats they were encountering. And obviously I went and reported it, but the fact that students didn't have a direct mechanism to do that really showed me this is a big issue. So increasing awareness around that. And then on the note of awareness, the last thing there is a public awareness campaign around, safety and security. I think a lot of the time, MCPS can look reactive in kind of what it does. Something happens and we react to it, right? But with something like this, we're always being proactive. We're always trying to take preventative measures. The issues are that sometimes we're not promoting those steps that we're doing. So with this, I want a public awareness campaign to say, hey, before something terrible like what happened at Magruder a couple of years ago happens, here's all the steps we're taking to promote public safety in our schools. And that could, satisfy some of those things like increased awareness of student reporting channels. Increasing awareness about these initiatives could really help support that. And then finally, a student safety advisory group is recommended in this resolution. That's something I think is really important. I've already talked to the chief safety officer in MCPS about that, and she's totally on board. And all of this would have to be introduced to the board at the same time the general safety and security presentation is going on April 2024. This would be presented as its own separate thing, though. So that was a handful, a lot of stuff there, a lot of different things. But yeah, that's the general summary of the actual things this resolution would do.
Okay, great. And it's, it's really good to see proactive. There's a lot of reactive processes and, stuff that has to be done once there's an incident, but, taking advantage of, getting students on the same page, having them know where to report and stuff like that. Now, is there already an anonymous reporting system? It's just people don't know it enough. Is that basically what it is, or?
Yeah, so there's obviously going to be a few. I think the most notable one that was established recently is the Safe Schools MD tip line. That's something that was meant for students to report any safety concerns that would have a system of going down the appropriate channels to reach administration. But you ask students and they really don't know about that at all. So that was something that was, in the name Safe Schools was supposed to be for that reason. And I think informing students of channels like that is 100% a strong method of kind of increasing that. But they're also looking into alternative ways, QR codes that lead to Google Forms. It's really just about ensuring that students aren't misusing these channels. So that's really the thing. If someone's just, because, at Blair, for example, we had multiple bomb threats just through email. And they had to put the school in shelter and everything like that, but they weren't found to be true. So just making sure that people aren't utilizing these platforms for false kind of reports is just something that's really, really important. So they're trying to figure out ways to do that, but also increasing awareness about what we have now.
Okay, yeah, and that's tricky to do while keeping things anonymous as well. I can see how that would be, yeah, tricky. Okay, great. And so what would be like an example of some of the student safety practices, like promotion? I'm not looking for like specific, just kind of like general, like what you mean by those.
Are you talking about the public?
Public awareness campaign to
Yeah.
promote public safety practices in schools?
Yeah, so I think a big part of that would be social media. I think students should really, be at the forefront of a lot of this discussion. So promoting it through obviously the channels that we already have, things like Twitter, Instagram, all those kinds of things, maybe even YouTube. Just promoting practices we have to ensure safety of our students through social media, but also just through, MCPS has a lot of channels to present news or information, right? We have newsletters, for example, that are emailed to people. Those are really, really big opportunities. And just reaching out to local media to talk about some of the new things that we're doing. For example, a lot of people don't know we're installing security cameras in all of our elementary schools, which is a big undertaking, multi-million-dollar undertaking. But a lot of people don't know about that. So really just saying, okay, what media outlets can we use? What social media outlets can we use? Can we use newsletters, emails, all this kind of stuff? So basically use the channels that we have to reach out to the community already, and basically just ensure that all of our school safety initiatives that we're working on right now are being, sent through those channels actively. And I think that's really the big thing. And I think it can take place over the course of a few months and just really promoting that. And then, obviously with students specifically, you would be talking about those informative things, right? So I think to parents and the general communities about what we're doing, and for students about how you guys can help and what you guys can do. Because like you said earlier, we're on the ground, we're seeing the issues firsthand. How can we help to let people know about the issues, or maybe even propose solutions to the issues that we may come up with? So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, like you said, and it's just very key to have the people on the ground helping. Like, for example, with that gun that was found, it was yesterday, right? It was only because of a anonymous report. So it's so important to have people feel like they can trust the administration to take things seriously and who to go to. And it's good of that student yesterday to save the day for everyone, including the student arrested. Like, things could have been a lot worse, so for them as well.
That's exactly right.
So okay, let's see what other questions I've got for you. Kind of answered a lot of the questions that I had already.
Good.
So what what are students saying? Like, is there some, it gives us some examples, I guess, of students that have come up to you and what they're saying and why you think these address their concerns, I guess.
Yeah, so students have reached out to me personally. And in the survey I did, I left a section for students to say anything that they felt about safety and security, and I actually collected a few of those quotes that I'm planning to present to the board. So I can actually talk to you about a few of them. So one of them I kind of touched on earlier, which is a student said, quote, "It's impossible for students to reach out about their urgent safety needs." I think that's, a really big thing that a lot of students don't know those channels. And like you said, yesterday, the incident with the loaded gun, it was a student who reported that through an anonymous channel. So, with the limited knowledge we have for students around that, and we're already getting those tips, imagine if like the large majority or maybe even all students knew exactly who to go to, how to go to them, or what channels to report information, all the tips we would be receiving and all the ways we could avoid things like, the fight between the two schools, at the football game earlier this year, which happened multiple times. But, the one at the metro station, for example, that is something that could have been avoided, if we had someone through social media see that and report it directly to someone that they knew. So, right now a lot of students, they told me that they don't feel like they know those systems, and we know that there's huge potential and huge benefit if they do. Another student said overall communication needs to be improved. This is something I've heard repeatedly from students, which is when there's a safety incident or emergency, it often takes, they feel, their administration too long to get to students about it. Oftentimes, and I know this for sure, the student message and the parent message is a little bit different, in which I guess the student message isn't really as helpful or informative. And it's kind of like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, which is obviously important to include, but it should also be really informative and kind of, tell us everything that we need to know as well. But also just the speed, at which that we're communicating information, I think is really, really important. Obviously, it's important to include key details about an incident, because if you don't, the rumors begin to spread. And that's when things can really get bad, because a rumor doesn't seem like a big deal until like the whole school believes that a terrible thing has occurred, when reality was something different. So, there's always a line that you want to, be very wary of crossing in that regard. You don't want to give out too much information, especially if there's an active investigation or a sensitive issue. But I think students just have really told me that they want to see faster communication, and they want to see as much depth as they can get, obviously. Um, and then another comment here about reporting. And then a comment here that I got that I thought was kind of really interesting, because it's really on the nose about what I'm trying to do here, was, quote, "Schools should take a moment to address school safety." So I was like, wow, look at that. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here. So I think students have told me a lot about this, which is, in the survey, I asked students whether they felt safe going to schools, right? And only 5% of students said they always felt safe. Now, albeit most of the students said they most of the time felt safe, but the fact that only 5% said they always felt safe, I mean, I'm not expecting that to be all students or even half of students, but at least 20, 30%. But only 5 students, and even less, thought that their peers felt safe in schools. And that's a really, really worrying trend. And I think that a big reason for that is what we were talking about earlier. When an incident occurs, then we respond. But students really are thinking like, okay, I don't want to wait for that next incident. You go into the building, you don't know what can happen. But if we're taking these proactive measures and saying before something happens, we're doing this, this, and this to prevent it from happening, students, I think, can really feel a lot more comfortable, because the overwhelming majority of students in that survey said they believe the school system can make meaningful changes to improve how safe they feel in schools. That's a question I purposely added in there to see, should I really make a resolution? And after that response, I really realized I should. So yeah, that's something I've gotten. And then around the ID policies, there's actually been kind of a mixed response from some students. What I've noticed, a lot of students at schools without the ID policy seem to have more pushback than students at schools with the ID policy. A lot of people I know, Walter Johnson was the first to have it. They've had it since like the middle of last year. They said at the beginning, students were a little bit like, oh, I don't really want to do this too much. But they said after a while, a lot of students realized that how important it was to have those ID policies, and have kind of just gotten in the routine of doing it. I heard similar things at other schools, like with Rockville. I heard some students said if you keep forgetting your ID, it can be kind of a burden, and then you may have to wait in a line to get into school. But other students said, hey, we need this. And I know that maybe it can cost some lines, but I feel a lot safer. And I think every school needs this. And doing the survey on that, I found the majority, really a 2-to-1 ratio of students felt like the ID policy, if it did cause major disruptions, which is how it's worded in the resolution, would be beneficial for students. So I think that's something that was a hard choice for me, but I said we need to have identified identification for students. You go to any college campus, you go to any business, you go to MCPS central office, and you have to have identification. And schools, especially high schools, should really be no different. So that was one where I got really specific feedback from students around that. So as long as I think administrations are working together and implementing it in a way that's effective, I think that's a really good thing. But yeah, I've heard a number of things about that. And just students, they just don't feel as comfortable going to school anymore as I think they did in the past, especially when students are bringing loaded guns, when we're having fights at football games, when we're having all these incidents, bomb threats, for example. So yeah, I think that, we just have to take proactive action to prevent these things from happening instead of waiting for them to happen and then react to them.
Yeah, great. Yeah, again, I think proactive is definitely the way to do it. Now, one question that you may not be able to answer, just kind of curious on the specifics of like the student reporting form. How do they make sure it gets to the right people timely, right? Like, like yesterday, if they got that report today, it would have the entire purpose would have already, gone away. So I was curious if you know about like, I mean, does it have like, ways to directly get in touch with like your admin, or is it like go to a system wide sort of book and then they sort it to where it's supposed to be or something like that?
Yeah, so the form was an idea that they had, and that what you just brought up was one of the issues with it, which is let's say that we get a report, right, and someone's not at their desk, right, whether it be in the main office or the security office or whatever, that's a really, really big liability, right? Because someone reported something and someone didn't see it, and it may just be because of chance. No one did anything wrong, but that's actually an issue they ran into, and they're trying to figure out ways to do that. And so one thing they were saying, at least with the door monitoring technology, that could be similarly used with the form, is like a ding system. So you get a report, it's like, it dings the office, it makes like an audible noise. So okay, we just got a report. It's not like you have to wait for someone to refresh the form, because you can't really have someone sitting there looking at it. But I know at my school we have multiple main office staff. We have people in the security office, all that kind of stuff at all times. So that's something they're looking into. But they said that that was a really, really big challenge. So it's like those false reports. How do you make sure people check in on time? That's why they haven't instituted a program like that yet. But I still want them to look into ways they can do that. And whether that looks like the additional security technology of building in those systems that alert people when those forms come in, maybe that's part of it. And I think that's something they're definitely looking into for sure. But yeah, that's the reason we don't have that right now. I know that they mentioned is because if they don't get it, if they receive a report and don't address it timely enough, or receive something on Friday and then the weekend comes and they can't, and no one's looking at it, that can be a really, really big issue on a big liability for the school system. So they're trying to figure out a way to get immediate responses every single time. So they're definitely looking into that, but that's definitely a big concern.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. And maybe something, where it notifies the school, but also a team, at central office that is able to see it. And then, an acknowledgement comes in from the school, hey, we've seen it. And
Yeah.
if they don't get that, then, it's kind of something we do in computer programming where you have this acknowledgement sent back and forth. If I send a message and I don't get the acknowledgement back, I'm assuming that they haven't received it. So
Interesting.
just,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, just one idea.
Oh
Computer
yeah.
programming. Yeah. So, yeah, but that's just ways to, kind of, double the chance or, whatever that it's seen, right? You get it to multiple sources and then they have to communicate to say, hey, did you see this also, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So, got one other question for you, and this one's a little tricky, I know. But we're talking about security, and I think it's very relevant right now. And that's given the current events in the Middle East, what steps are the board, and I guess you specifically, taking to make sure that Jewish and Muslim students are safe at school and feel safe at school, especially considering the large rise in anti-Semitism in MCPS last year, even before recent the recent war. So that's
Yeah. So, obviously the first step is always going to be communication, right? Open-ended communication, with communities, making sure that there's forums for people to express their ideas and thoughts in schools as well. I know that, Jewish student unions and Muslim student associations are hosting meetings and kind of like town halls and stuff at the schools. And inviting anyone to kind of just, talk about their feelings and have discussions and all that kind of stuff. So I know that's an initiative they're taking. I think generally the school system doesn't like to take a stance on these sorts of things. Me obviously being included in that kind of stuff, I think it's important to remain impartial, but to just acknowledge and reflect the impact that this has had on our community and the impact that this has had on students. And I think, we should really be focusing on providing mental health resources that are available. And I think that's really always the important thing when we have an incident like this is providing those resources, especially for students, because I know it can be really, really difficult, and just ensuring that everyone's voice is heard, equally and equitably. So, it's definitely a tough question to answer because we want to remain impartial and everything like that. But I think we're definitely looking at ways to address hate bias in particular. Obviously, I hope that all the things in my resolution, like increased training for security guards, and more channels for students to report threats, I hope that they all in turn will kind of take a step in addressing hate and bias incidents because they're included in all of those types of things. But I think that going forward, we should really specifically look at those incidents because I think from the 2021 school year, 2022 school year, they increased 50% hate bias incidents. Like, as you mentioned, it's no surprise to anyone, especially anti-Semitism. And so doing things like what we did last year with the press conference, directly addressing it, but also making sure that we're taking steps in schools to make students, be able to report these incidents more, take action during these incidents, provide mental health support for students, and just make students feel more comfortable and safe. I think is definitely really important. So it's a really difficult issue to navigate. And obviously, I know that was a bit of a political answer, like not really directly addressing the point. It's definitely a difficult question, but I think providing those resources for students, making sure that everything is kind of open to everyone, we're ensuring that we're being kind of objective and everything like that, and just taking actual real steps to address hate bias incidents in particular, and maybe steps to address safety and security in general, which will in turn address that somewhat as well, which is what I'm trying to do. I think those are the best ways to really mediate the issue, but there's no clear good answer right now, I think. So that's really, I think, all I can say about that.
Okay, yep. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I know it's not an easy thing. And I think, one of the things that and I think I might have said this to you in our previous conversation as well. Everyone on every side of every issue, the common thread is they want kids to be safe. And people have different ideas about how to go about it. And I think that, in general, you're kind of going a good direction, which is we need to make everyone more safe,
Yeah.
which is kind of, that's kind of what I'm getting at or getting from you, which I think is a good thing. And, it's not that, this group or that group. I mean, I think that everyone deserves to be safe and feel safe, in the schools. And I think, there are certain groups that are feeling it more than others, especially right now. But, that's how we handle it, right? We just go
Yeah.
forward and try to make sure people are supported and everything. So
Yeah, exactly. And what you said there is exactly right. One, I think that's something that we can all acknowledge. Everyone in the community, whether you're a parent, whether you're a student, they all care about student safety, like literally everyone in the community. And we want all of our students to be protected. And I think that instead of, like you said, picking sides, even in safety, there's sides. Like, with certain approaches, some people may have strong opinions to do this or, that. What I'm really trying to do here is say, here's common ground where I think we can all agree on this. More training is better. Increased awareness on how to report issues is better. More safety technology is better, right? So I was trying to take those things that both sides of the issue may agree with, and also students provided to me that aligns with what they were saying, and combine all those pieces along with what I think is one of the most important ones, which is what's actually doable. So, in this, I met with MCPS administration multiple times to say, here are my ideas. Can we actually do them? Or is this going to be a resolution that either one may not even pass because board members are going to say this is totally unrealistic? Or two, will we put down our administration and they won't be able to fulfill it because we don't have the money for it or just not the procedure. So combining all those pieces, that's really what came about this. And yeah, it's about ensuring all our students are safe and taking, methods to do that I know everyone can probably agree with. So yeah, that's exactly the reasoning behind this. That's exactly the logic and mentality that I use. And so, I really appreciate you kind of acknowledging that. And also, this is what I promised back in my campaign. As what I was telling students, I care about your safety. I want to do this, this, and this. So now I have the opportunity to do that, and I'm really taking that opportunity and kind of trying to lead in the right direction. So yeah, I appreciate you acknowledging that for sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate you also, not just following through on your campaign promises, but come back talking to us
Of course.
and letting us help get word out about these issues, because I think it's something that the more people know about it, the more involvement you'll get, the better support. So just want to say thank you again for coming out, and wish you good luck with this on the meeting on October 26th. This being
Yeah,
proposed, right?
that's right.
Okay, circle back. So October 26th is being proposed, but you said something about
Mhm.
January or February also.
Okay, so here's the timeline. So when a resolution is introduced, it's introduced at one board meeting and voted on in the next. So I'm introducing it this Thursday on October 26th. The next board business meeting after that is November 9th. That's when we're actually going to raise our hands to vote on the resolution because it gives board members time. Then, if the resolution is passed, administration will provide an update on their general safety plan and on this specific resolution in April 2024 as outlined by the resolution. So those are the three kind of the timeline for the actual resolution.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to
Yeah,
get that all
yeah.
in one
That's
because I know you mentioned it a few different parts. I just wanted to get the timeline. So, okay, well, great. Thanks so much, and look forward to continuing to work with you, chat with you. Always available. So,
I
thank you.
appreciate it. Yeah, I'm always available to talk as well. So just let me know. But this was great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, have a good one. Schools should take a moment to address school safety. So I was like, wow, look at that. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here. So